Thank you so very much for joining us, Dr. Adela, today. So for starting it formally, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning to the respected participants from Pakistan, and a very warm welcome and good evening to the folks from Flinders University, Australia. It is my absolute honor and privilege to host the webinar of such prestige from the platform of Iqra University, Karachi, Pakistan, in collaboration with Innovative Research Universities, IRU, and Flinders University. My name is Ms. Javaria Shaikh, and I'm serving as a lecturer, Economics, Business Administration Faculty, Iqra University, Karachi, Pakistan. Iqra University traces its genesis back to January 1998 when it started its operation in Karachi, Pakistan. Iqra University is actually determined to achieve its mission of being a world-class institution of higher education and research, promoting technical skills, critical thinking, and public duty to develop health and prosperous and progressive society. The university in this regards offers graduate, undergraduate, and continuing education programs in all disciplines, including education, English, computer sciences, business administration, international relations, development studies, fashion design, and textile design. The program in these disciplines are conducted under the supervision of a highly qualified, professional, and motivated faculty. The university curricula not only competitive, but also in line with the academic practices globally. Iqra University is proud to be collaborating with IRU. IRU is actually a coalition of 7 comprehensive universities committed to achieve inclusive excellence in teaching, learning, and research in Australia. The member university includes Charles Darwin University, Flinders University, Griffith University, James Cook University, La Trobe University, Madrouche University, and Western Sydney University. The members' commitment and impact is both local and global, with a focus on advancing communities through education, resources, opportunities, and enterprise. The IRU's members' research focus is on translation and commercialization of research on issues of critical importance to the communities in which they are based in addressing problems of national and global scale. As an outward-looking network, the IRU seeks to strengthen Australia's integration with the countries of Asia. Today's webinar, Innovation Across the Globe, Developing the Workplace Innovation Scale, is one of the link. I'm humbled to welcome Ms. Sabi Qayyum, Country Director, Pakistan, IRU. Thank you, Ms., for your efforts in organizing today's session with one of the member universities, which is Flinders University. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Ms. Melissa, Country Manager, International Recruitment, Flinders University, Australia, along with our respected panelist, Professor Dr. Adela McMurray, who is actually a Professor of Management, Human Resource Management, and Innovation at the College of Business, Government, and Law, Flinders University, Australia. Thank you, Dr. Adela, for your precious time. It is an absolute honor to have you with us today. So giving you very brief about Dr. Adela, let me tell you that Professor Adela is Honorary Professor at RMIT University, Australia, and Adjunct Professor at Swinburne University, Australia. She serves as guest editor on the Journal of Applied Energy, the Journal of Clean Production, and she's Associate Editor of the Journal of Management History. Professor McMurray has extensive research experience in public and private sectors and has published over 300 publications. Her research is internationally recognized, and she's the recipient of Australian Research Council grants, 2 industry collaborative research grants, and various other international grants. Dr. Adela has also won numerous international teaching, leadership, human development resource supervision, and best paper awards. She chaired the USA Academy of Management's International Theme Committee and is a member of various journal editorial advisory boards. Adela's research expertise addresses innovation, culture, sustainability, commitment, entrepreneur, and leadership, including organizational change, challenges, and development in public and private sectors. Thank you, Dr. Adela, for joining us today. Speaking about the topic, which is actually innovation across the globe and developing the workplace innovation scale, I would like to say that if you could notice all that during the global coronavirus crisis, this pandemic, the world actually needed to move work, education, and play and everything to the digital regime. And that was to be done very quickly. One example of this accelerated adjustment is how the online collaboration hubs actually has managed to innovate to help companies around the world to pivot to remote working, as well as to some extent hiring, onboard, and training within days. Innovation in such times is crucial, but may also increase inequalities among countries, sectors, and group of population. Companies face unprecedented challenges in an economy dominated by globalization, rapid technological advancement, demographic changes, and fast shifting consumer demands. The ability to reinvest in products, services, and processes continuing is becoming essential for survival and success in the long run. Tackling these issues and challenges cannot be done single-handedly or by the senior teams alone. So they need to harness the creativity, insights, and engagement of the entire workforce. Leaders need to empower others to take the initiative, coaching and supporting them towards successful outcome. They must become the champions of employee empowerment, participation, and voice. The challenge for leaders is to take a systematic view of their own organizational structures and practices, creating the culture of innovation and an enterprise needed for 21st century challenges requires tenacity. It means confronting deeply embedded attitudes and behavior, asking difficult questions, and being open to experience the diverse range of the organization is the key to move ahead. With these opening remarks, I would now like to invite the respected panelists to please shed some light on the topic innovation across the globe and how we can actually develop the workplace innovation skill. We would be limiting the discussion to about 40 to 45 minutes, and which is going to be followed by the question and answer session. So if you have any question or query, you may send through the Zoom chat option. And at the end of the discussion, I will be choosing and forwarding the most relevant one to be answered by the eminent speaker. Over to you, Dr. Adela. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Dr. Shaikh, and certainly a relevant overview of where innovation is at the global level. And I must thank you so much for your invitation to be presenting my research with you and your faculty. It's a real privilege and an honour to be speaking with you, but also meeting with you today. So thank you again. I'll just talk about a little bit more about the innovation, just to reiterate what you've just said, and talk about the importance of the imperative to innovate. It's just no longer an interesting phenomena. It's actually an everyday reality. So no area of society can be insulated from it, as Arthur has said here, but also even further, if we're looking at workplaces specifically, 90% of executives see that COVID-19 will fundamentally change how they do business today. And that's come out of McKinsey. So just before I launch into my research around the workplace innovation scale and how it all came to be developed, I'll just let you in a little bit on a little bit of background and how it all came to be. I was working at Swinburne as their MBA Director of Research Projects and Master of Innovation Research Projects as well. What happened was we were the Australian Graduate School of Management, and we restructured and we became the Australian Graduate School of Entrepreneurship. So of course the Dean said, well, we are a Graduate School of Entrepreneurship, then we need to be researching and studying around specifically around entrepreneurship concepts. So I thought, well, my whole area was organizational culture and national culture and all aspects of cultural diversity. I thought, how am I going to diversify here? And what can I actually specifically look at? And to be able to build on culture. And so I thought innovation, this could actually work very well. So then I started working around and researching around the area of innovation. So I kind of fell into it. And that's how my research on innovation expanded through to link through various concepts with the aspects of culture and so on. So in researching around innovation and looking at the literature, and conducting, massive systematic literature reviews, it became very apparent that the innovation literature fell. The thousands and thousands of research publications actually fell into two categories. There's outcome innovation, which is quantifiable and easy to define and measure. And that particular area of innovation is dominant in the field. And also there's a stream of process innovation, where you're looking at culture and the value of people, which is challenging to define and measure. And I thought that this is actually where I do fit in, the process innovation area and literature. So then looking at that whole area, I thought, right, that's where I'm going to be researching. And we looked at looking at a definition of workplace innovation. And this is what was came out of the literature. And it is that workplace innovation is a psychological construct that is contextual, that is in the space that you're in, and is a process of idea generation created by individuals, either alone or in a team within the workplace, and is fostered through an innovation climate. Now you can see that there are four major components in this definition, and that is that we're looking at individuals and teams and a workplace, that is the context, and also a climate. So from that, we developed, from that definition that we developed a measurement, a scale, because measurement, definition and measurement go hand in hand. You cannot separate the two. However you define a concept, you need to be able to then develop a scale that is in line with that definition, that captures all aspects of that definition. So the elements need to be complementary and also mutually compatible, so that they inform one another. So we developed a workplace innovation scale, which we call the WISE scale. It's comprised of 24 items, and those 24 items actually inform 4 dimensions. And the 4 dimensions are organizational innovation, and that is all about culture at the very macro level of an organization. Then the next layer is innovation climate, and innovation climate is all about the relationship with the boss and the subordinate. And then the next layer down is the team innovation, where people work in teams. And then from there, right at the shop floor level, is the individual innovation component. So we developed this 24-item 4-dimensional scale, and we ran it through its tests to see what sort of reliability it had. And it had a consistent reliability of a Cronbach alpha score of over 0.89. So here's an example of the scale itself and the items that comprise each of the dimensions. So here we're looking at the organizational innovation. Remember that we're looking at the culture of the organization, the culture level, the macro level, and examples of the items in that particular dimension are around our workplace has a vision that is made very clear to the employees. And we're looking at the way in which people set their goals, and innovation is linked to business goals. Also, opportunities to learn are created through systems and procedures, and our workplace rewards innovative ideas regularly. The second dimension we're looking at is the innovation climate. That's the next layer down below the culture level of organizational innovation. And as you can see, this is all about the relationship with the boss and the subordinate. And if you see here some of the items, example of the items here, which are 6 items that comprise the innovation climate layer, you can see that there's communication with the boss where you discuss things regularly on how to get ahead. I'm always given opportunities to try new ideas and approach new problems. Also, my boss gives me useful feedback in terms of creative ideas, and my boss gives me an opportunity to learn from my mistakes. And my boss and my colleagues perceive me to be a creative problem solver. So 6 items comprise the innovation climate. Now moving down to the next layer, when we're looking at team innovation, and here we've got 5 items, and you can see the example of the 5 items, that we work in teams to solve complex problems. In our workplace, teams have freedom to make decisions and act on them without needing to ask for permission. In my company, people feel a strong sense of membership and support, and colleagues welcome uncertainty and unusual circumstances related to our work. And amongst my colleagues, I'm the first one to try new ideas and methods. So now we're moving to the last layer of, and the last dimension of the workplace innovation scale, and that is individual innovation. And here we've got 8 items, and you can see the 8 items examples here are around demonstrating originality. My work requires me to make innovative decisions. I make time to pursue my own ideas or projects. I'm constantly thinking of new ideas to improve my workplace, and I express myself frankly in staff meetings, and I work in teams to solve complex problems. And then the last item within the individual innovation dimension is, in our workplace, performance measurement is related to one's initiative to solve problems. So here we have developed the scale out of the literature, out of the comprehensive systematic literature review. And we also have a definition as well, which is very aligned. So the two, the scale and the definition, are very aligned. So now we need to go out and test it. And we did this in a longitudinal study over a 9-month period. And this was actually presented, the research from this was presented at the 5th European Conference on Organisational Knowledge. We ran this, this was presented in 2003, but this longitudinal study, it was around to develop the scale to identify the measure and also to determine the content validity and reliability of the developed scale. With the total sample of 852 respondents over 3 surveys, which were conducted over the 9-month period in both the service and manufacturing industries in Australia and in New Zealand. And we used an analysis comprised of principal axis factoring and Verimax with case and normalization. And it actually confirmed the 4 WISE factors labelled as organisational innovation, innovation climate, and individual innovation and team innovation. So the scale was confirmed through its relationships with other variables. You can't do it unless you have other variables within the study. And we had a Cronbach alpha score of 0.89, which actually indicated a high level of reliability of the measure itself. So we were on our way. So what did we want to do now? We have a new scale and we wanted to now test it elsewhere. And so now we wanted to say, right, we're going to test it both in Australia and we're going to test it overseas as well. So having tested it and run it through its reliability and its validity as well, we thought, right, we have to build a global research design. So the next step was, how are we going to do this? So we were using the reliable scale, which is the workplace innovation scale, but to ensure for extra reliability and ensuring that we could find relationships with consistent other variables, we also included in each of the studies another reliable scale that had a good track record of reliability. So we could benchmark and compare our scale with that scale as well in the one study. And so we were able to then examine relationships that were very context specific by including 2 scales in the one study. And we also wanted to be able to, if we were going to run the scale in other countries overseas, we had to set up collaborations with a dependable network of other researchers to conduct the research. And so what was the first step? Was to network overseas to find who would be interested in running the study and replicating studies overseas. But also the safest way to start with the research was to start at home in our home country. And then once we could see that we had a scale that behaved reliably in multiple contexts, in multiple industries, then we could extend overseas. So we were very conservative in the steps that we took to roll out the scale and the studies themselves. But by doing that, it took a little bit of time, quite a few years. Remember, we started in 2003. We are in 2021 and we're still going. So where did we start? We started at home. And where did we look? Well, first of all, we looked at the Australian IT service sector. And this is what we found in this particular sector. We found that this was the finding, we found that the greater the amount of organisational politics in the IT sector, the lower the level of perceived organisational innovation. And to give you a little bit more about this study, it was actually conducted in the Australian Information Technology Services Organisation. 169 employees took place. Respondents were participated in this study, and at all levels in the divisional business unit, the employees took place and had respondents. We also included the politics questionnaire in their scale as well, and we found that again that the workplace innovation scale had a high level of reliability, and so specifically the results show that the greater the amount of organisational politics, the lower level of perceived organisational innovation. And specifically, this was at the R.5.20 level. So it actually found that previous studies support this research as well. And we found that we also had individuals' locus of control in that study as well. So again, in addition, not only was it the greater amount of politics, but the locus of control and the perception of workplace innovation were actually found as well. Looking at the second study that we conducted in 2006 and also in 2012, this was in the national healthcare sector, and we had 142 administrative and healthcare professionals from a medium-sized private consulting firm located across 28 different sites across Australia that actually participated in this study. And the other scale that we had in that study was the multi-factor leadership questionnaire, the MLQ, which has a very, very long and traditional track record of reliability. And we also had the organisational climate questionnaire as well, that was demonstrating high track level of reliability through many, many years, and the workplace innovation scale as well. So through that study, we found that pressure negatively predicted workplace innovation. And further on, we also found that through our 60 to 98 surveys, this was in 2012, we found that with a response rate of 69%, we found that the workplace innovation had predicted cohesion, and this was at the individual level, and significantly predicted the team innovation as well. So moving on now to the healthcare sector, and we found that in the healthcare sector, the not-for-profit sector, leadership directly promotes workplace innovation and can foster a healthy climate. And this was a study that we conducted in 2013. And we found that in that particular study, we found that that was in a not-for-profit organisation, that was at Wesley Mission, a very large not-for-profit sector across Australia. And the major finding there was that leadership directly promotes workplace innovation and can foster a healthy climate. Now, this was quite a large study of 5 focus groups and also respondents, but also what we found was that in this particular sector, where we had the leadership, transformational leadership scale, which again is a very long track record of reliability. We also had the organisational climate questionnaire, providing a track record of high reliability, along with the organisational climate questionnaire and our workplace innovation scale, all showing high reliability. We found that again, leadership was a major factor in promoting innovation, particularly workplace innovation, and fostering a healthy climate. Now, this particular study was funded by the Australian Research Council, and it was a $600,000 Australian study conducted over 3 years. So some more examples from Australia. These aren't all the studies that we conducted in Australia. I've just picked a few that I thought might be of interest, and thought that, to show the diversity of where the research had been conducted, and also the diversity of the concepts that it has been associated with and correlated with, to show really strong relationships. So in the Australian government sector, this is a recent study. We looked at that found that the workplace innovation in government organisations has a strong relationship with organisational culture. And this was a survey of 479 employees. And again, we had a very strong relationship between culture and innovation and leadership. And this was conducted in a Victorian public sector organisation. Again, it's showing that amongst almost 500 employees, you could see a very clear relationship between culture and workplace innovation. The next study, looking at the Australian public sector again, we're seeing that this particular one was conducted by Mahmoud Musa, and with him, he looked at the barriers of innovation in the Australian public sector. And what we did is we found that the barriers on innovation in Australian public sector organisations are actually quite large, and they relate to particular areas of resources and communication, and also the ways in which people work in teams and individual levels. So we found that this was a multi-method study, that there was both qualitative research and also there was, which used NVivo Pro 11 and Pro 12 software. And we also used statistical studies as well, and where we had 12 hypotheses. So it was a very large study, and went right across, and we've got a lot of publications out of this one. In fact, 2 books have come out of this particular study as well. One is just now, it's with Palgrave, and also another book with Routledge, and it's looking at innovation and leadership in the public sector, and it's in press at the moment. So watch for that release very soon next year. And also what came out of this were 6 journal papers as well. And there are still more coming. So it's a very big study and still ongoing, and we're still publishing. But again, I've only just shared with you some of the studies. If you just, with each of these studies, I could just do an entire presentation on each one alone, but I wanted to give you an overall overview of how we're sort of moving along with the development, the genesis of the scale, and then how it's actually behaving both at the national level across Australia, but also internationally as well. So a few examples now. We move on to selected examples globally, and you'll see that we're looking at the Australasian hotel sector, and there we looked at what we actually found, a significant relationship between learning, innovation and climate. And this was actually conducted over 800 respondents who were employed over 50 hotels, and the 45 of those hotels were from a large international brewery group located in Melbourne, but also 5 independent hotels across Australia and also in New Zealand as well. And so the response rate here was 75%. We looked at including the organisational learning profile, and which is a very well-known scale with, again, a strong track record. And also we looked at including the workplace innovation scale. And again, we had very significant relationships demonstrating a correlation between learning, innovation and climate. The next scale that the next study that we actually looked at was looking at a transnational organisation, and this transnational organisation had branches in Africa, Asia, Australasia, Canada, South America, and the USA. And here the major finding was that there were dimensions of knowledge sharing have a significant effect on the 4 dimensions of workplace innovation. And so this was a survey of 2,723 respondents in the transnational corporation, and actually covered 42 countries in total. So there, again, a very large study and far-reaching in a transnational organisation. And again, the workplace innovation had behaved very reliably across all of those countries as it related to knowledge sharing and also the dimensions of workplace innovation. Looking at the next study, which was conducted in Vietnam and Thailand in SMEs. So now here we're going from a corporate, a large corporate organisation, transnational corporation, to looking at SMEs in Thailand and in Vietnam. And the finding there was that the effect of work value ethic on workplace innovation becomes significant when design leadership serves as a mediator. So there we looked at, we had a 97% response rate, and we looked at businesses that had a small businesses, both looking at various parts of manufacturing and also services, and again, very diverse population sample compared to the previous population sample, as you can see. Moving on to a couple more examples of actually looking at, looking at studies that we conducted. We looked at also the US, in the US context. We look at US workplaces, and we gathered data from employees working in the USA. And what we found there was that the main finding was that organisational justice and formal procedures promoted all 4 dimensions of workplace innovation, and thus was important in managing workplace innovation processes. And that was a study conducted where we had 282 individuals employed in a variety of context workplaces across the USA. And another study here that was conducted in Pakistan and Australia. It was a comparative study, and this is in 2021. And what we found here was that we actually conducted this as SMEs, both SME ventures operating in Australia and Pakistan. So a total of 753 usable questionnaires were returned, and 360 from Australia and 393 from Pakistan. And this was from executives working in entrepreneurial SME ventures. And so the data was collected to examine and compare the relationships between internal resource capabilities such as work, values, ethic, organizational culture, design, leadership, workplace innovation, and organizational performance of entrepreneurial SME ventures operating in Australia and Pakistan. And what we did was here, just to make sure that I haven't gone into the actual research designs for each one, but in each of these research designs, we actually conducted a pre-test, and that was conducted in each of the studies to ensure that we had the validity of what we were measuring. And then once we could determine that what the pre-test had determined was a valid a scale, then we went to a pilot study, which is a small rehearsal or a dress rehearsal of the main study. And we did that with all of those studies that I've identified. Here is just some examples to show you and discuss today. And then it was really interesting with the Pakistan and Australian SMEs that there were some differences, but there also were some similarities, showing that in one way that a significant finding that the design, leadership, and workplace innovation mediate the relationship between organizational culture and work values ethic, and also organizational performance in Australia. But a difference was that, on the other hand, they do not mediate the relationship between work values ethic and organizational performance in Pakistan. That is showing a significant difference between entrepreneurial ventures, SMEs particularly, in a developed and a developing country. So we did find differences within that data set that were not totally consistent with the findings, that it was slightly different in a developing and a developed country. So this is a variable that needs to be taken into consideration when you are looking at comparative studies in any country at all. So that's about all in terms of selected examples of how the study has been evolving over time, over the many years since 2003. At the moment, we're in the process of analysing databases that we have from Japan and from China, Australia, the UK, Malaysia, Mexico, Canada, and we're open to any collaborations across the across any countries for more studies to be conducted and more data to be collected, and forming collaborations with more researchers, and to be able to publish collaboratively together as well. So, and thank you very much for listening.